Safari. Yeah, let's go with the meme here this week. Actually, this talk is called Mastering the Ruby Debugger. I like the Safari name better because I'm not going to teach you to master the Ruby debugger. First of all, let's do a quick survey. How many people here use the debugger in Ruby? Okay, very much. How many people here have never used the debugger in Ruby? Okay, not successfully. Okay, that's cool. Turns out the debugger is pretty cool, and the reason I'm giving this talk is all because of some conversations that happened on Twitter. But before we get into that, I want to give you a quick review of a little game that I used to play in high school. It's called Black Box. Yeah, okay, you remember this. One player secretly puts some marbles into this grid, of this 8x8 grid, and the other player will probe the box by sending in signals from the side. And you can get a hit, you can get a bounce like that, you can get a double bounce where it reflects back out, you can get an immediate reflection if the thing's on the edge, or you can even get a reflection from two things like that. And of course, you can always go straight through, or you can get some kind of weird path thing going on. Now remember, the second player that's doing the probing doesn't know where those green dots are. So to him, the board will look something like this. Now, if I had more than half an hour, we'd actually play this game. I would let you probe, and I would tell you where the signals came out the other side of the black box. But here's a previous game that we saw that we had played. And you can see here, here's A. A went straight through. C, however, did a bouncing thing right there. So maybe there's a little green dot here, or maybe there's one of those complex paths. You don't know. You got to keep probing the black box until you find the solution, which in this case is just simply this. Turns out this game is a marvelous metaphor for debugging, because our program has some internal state that's not immediately apparent to us. And we have to figure out what it's doing by observing it from the outside. A debugger, or the tools that we use to do debugging, allow us to get into that internal state and do some direct observing rather than just observing the outside effects. So debugging allows you to quickly zero in on that. Now I mentioned there was a little controversy about the debugger. It all started with this group. You may have heard of them. A couple months back, they put on a show where they talked about styles of debugging, and amongst the panel, 100% of them did not on a regular basis use the Ruby debugger. Now, people listened to the show, and what they heard was that good developers don't use the Ruby debugger, which of course created all kinds of Twitter controversy, right? Now, to be fair, these guys didn't start this. I started it. Back in October of 2007, if you can see this, I was teaching a class on test-driven development. And in that class was Giles Bouquet. Anybody know Giles? Yeah, okay. He's a character. A character, very good. That's a good way to say it. He wrote this article after the first day of class. And he said, debugger support is considered harmful. He said things like, Jim Weirich, people asked him about the inadequacies of the debugger, and his response was, what debugger? Because at the time, I had never even used the Ruby debugger. I didn't even know there was a debugger at that time. So when they asked me about the debugger, I said, I never use it. I don't know about it. So Giles wrote up this article. He said things like, asking why Ruby has a weak debugger is like asking why a dolphin doesn't have gills. Ruby has weak debugger support because Ruby programmers shouldn't be using a debugger. It gets better. Okay, and surprisingly, he was surprised by the feedback he got on this article. Yeah, I can't imagine why he was surprised. Yeah, so even back in 2007, when the debugger support was admittedly much weaker than it is now, there was this controversy. People thought that good programmers don't use debuggers, and there was a series of blog articles written back and forth defending one side or the other. I'm here to tell you I do not support the idea that good programmers don't use debuggers. However, I myself don't use it often. I have a layer of things that I do when I'm debugging programs. Or debuggers, not the first thing I reach for, but it's certainly in my bag of tools that if I need it, I can reach for it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that bag of tools and how you might use it. Okay, so I already did the survey. How many people here? How many people are of the opinion that you shouldn't be using a debugger? Is there anybody in here? Let's see. I guess it's only radical blog writers that hold that opinion. Okay, well that's awesome. That's awesome. And truthfully, those of you that do use the debugger probably are a lot more expert at it than I am. That's why I'm kind of backing off of my title, Mastering the Ruby Debugger. But I'm going to show you a few tricks that if you've never used it before, it'll make it really easy to use. Cool. Let's start with a demo.
Jumping to the demo, guys.
I give a talk called Presentations for Presenters, and in that talk I tell them the scariest thing that you can do is a live demo. So here I am. Okay, let's look at a simple program I'm calling Convert. And here it is in all its glory. It's much more complicated than it needs to be, just so I got a little something to debug here. You see it's got a degrees converter, converts from degrees Fahrenheit to degrees Celsius. You initialize it with the degrees Fahrenheit. There's a degrees C that calculates how to convert that number. And then in the main program down here, where the cursor is down here, we create a converter grabbing the argument from the argument list, and then we print out the converted value. So let's run that and see how that works. Ruby convert 98.6, because I happen to know that actually works out to be an even number in Celsius. Oh yeah, that's real even. I have a bug in my program. Well, what's the first, let me ask you, when you discover a bug like this, what's the first tool that you use to investigate it?
My eyes. My eyes.
Your eyes, okay, very good. I'm waiting for a particular answer that no one said yet.
Run tests.
Oh, thank you, yes, run your tests. I think that's one of the big reasons that the debugger is not needed as much, because when you're developing in a TDD style, you write a little bit of code, you run your tests, you write some tests, you write some code, you write some tests, you write some code. So when you get a bug, your tests immediately tell you what the bug is, and the fact that you just wrote a little bit of code is a good indicator of where to start looking for that bug. So you don't have to dig deep to find out where the bug is. So I don't have tests for this thing, I'm just running from the command line, but I do notice it's wrong, so let's jump into that. And I want to know what's going on. So right here, let's make sure we're getting the right result out. And my first tool that I reach for is the Ruby put statement. How many people use puts a lot? That is perfectly fine, because for a lot of things, for shallow debugging, it's a perfectly good thing. In fact, I use it so much that my editor has a macro for doing that. Okay, and I always use that debug colon thing in all these debug statements, so I can grep them and remove them after the fact, because I don't want to leave them littering the code. So let's run it now, and I say the result is, that didn't tell me very much. Okay, what else can we look at? Well, there's an offset in there, so let's put the offset in there. And offset 32, okay, that looks good. There's a factor. Let's look at the factor. And the factor is 0, which is kind of an indication that that's where the problem lies. So we go back, now we use our eyes. Actually, we probably should have used our eyes to begin with, but sometimes we just kind of jump in. So we use our eyes and we look and see how factor is calculated here. You see I'm doing an integer divide. Yeah. We have to divide floating point numbers if we want a floating point result. So we fix that, and bam, we've got 37 as our output. So that's good. Did you notice what I did though? I had to use puts, and I wasn't sure where the error is. So I had to kind of probe around a little bit. I tried looking at result, I looked at this. I had to look at a couple things before I found the thing where the problem resided. And that's kind of typical in puts. If you don't know where the problem is and you're kind of probing with puts, you got to run it several times. Now if you got unit tests set up and you can rerun a unit test over and over and over again, that's not too bad. But sometimes you want something a little more interactive. Let me show you a little trick here. Let's take out all these put statements, and instead I'm going to use a library called pry. How many people have used pry? Awesome. Yeah, pry is really interesting. So binding pry, let's put that right there, and I'm going to switch to a real terminal here. Yeah, I'm in the right place. I'm going to Ruby require pry, because I have to require the library here. And let's run convert 98.6. And that dumps us into an interactive IRB session. Essentially, it's kind of like an enhanced IRB session where we can see what the bindings are and everything. And you can do things in here. So you can do normal things. Like I can ask for what is the factor, and I removed my bug, so we're not seeing the bug right now, but I can explore the variables. I can get a list of all the things available to me, and you can see here in the list, it gives out a bunch of things with underscores under that, but it also gives out this, let's reduce the size just a wee bit there. You can see here, we have degrees F listed. I can print out the degrees F. I can explore the object and look at its instance variables. I can look at all its bindings, and I can explore. You can do other things as well. Pry has a complete list of shell commands that you can actually run shell stuff from within it. There's an ls. Here's an ls command on the containing directory. So you can do lots of interesting things within pry. You can delve into objects. Let's, I find the command syntax for pry really, really interesting because it's all kind of command line based. So when I cd within pry, I'm not changing directories in the operating system sense. I'm changing the local viewpoint of where pry is looking at. So I can cd down into objects. The only objects of interest we have right now is maybe degrees F. So let's cd into that. And we realize there's not too much in degrees. You know, what kind of object is degrees F? It's a floating point number. We are inside a floating point number within pry. Is that cool? A little weird, okay. To get out of an object, you can cd up. Okay, and now we're back at the outer edge of it. We can cd up again, and that takes us out of the entire program. So you can move around, you can look at objects, you can examine them. If you are not quite sure where the problem lies in your data, but you know that right here at this point in the code, something needs to be right, and you want to explore the data in your system at a particular point in your code, pry is an excellent tool to do that. You can really walk object trees and move around and look at things. Okay. Questions on pry? Yeah?
Can you step or skip?
No, you cannot step. Pry is a data explorer. It is not a program state explorer, which we'll get to in just a minute. Yes?
Does it work on JRuby?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you know if it works on JRuby?
No idea.
No idea. I think, if I remember right, I remember reading on the document page that they're working on getting it on JRuby, and I think that's a little old, so I think it's working now on JRuby, but I'm not sure.
I know there's some issues on JRuby on Windows.
Imagine that. When Uncle Bob was talking about diversity here, and he says, what's the major feature that's common across here? I was thinking MacBooks. So if you're looking for diversity, there is a group of programmers out there that really, really need some good Ruby love. So if you are interested in helping the Windows developers, more power to you. So I don't have to. No, seriously, that is a good thing to do. Okay, so any other questions on Pry? Pry is awesome. If you're not using Pry now, do a gem install Pry and just start putting it in your debugging sessions. Yeah?
Can you jump into Pry from a debugging context? So you said you can't do step or skip debugging operations in Pry. Well, let's say that you want to from the debugging section that's already started.
Okay.
How do you do that?
Okay, well, that's an interesting thing. I don't know. We'll try that in the next demo, because that's an interesting question. Okay, the question is, can I get into Pry from a regular debugging session? I imagine you can, but we'll give it a try and see. You might get confused about where the source is, but we'll see once. Okay, next. I'm going to talk about a little program. I want to explain the program a little bit before we jump into it. This is the Gilded Rose kata, which is essentially a refactoring kata. We're going to see it before the refactoring is done, so the code is going to be ugly, which is good because I'm demonstrating a debugger, which is exactly what I want. So the Gilded Rose is essentially an inventory program. You have a list of items, and you track two things on these items: the quality of the item, how much it is worth, and how many days you have to sell it in. So under normal conditions, a normal item, when you update it on a daily basis, the quality should go down by 1 tick, and the sell-in date, the number of days you have left to sell it, has to go down by 1 day. However, if you're on or after the sell date, the quality goes down by 2 rather than 1. And that's for normal items. But you have special items like aged breed, where the older it gets, the higher the quality. So the quality goes up for aged breed items. And when you hit the sell date, it goes up by 2, so it gets even better. You have strange items like the Sulphurus, the Hand of Ragnaros. How many people even know what that is? Okay, you're WoW players. The Hand of Ragnaros is an epic item, and its quality does not change, and its sell-in date does not change. It is a fixed value no matter what time it is. Okay, the guy who put this kata together is obviously a World of Warcraft fan here, because we've got some other references here. Here we have a backstage pass. Its quality goes up. The closer you get to the concert date, the more valuable the backstage pass is going to be. In fact, when you hit 10 days within the conference, it starts going up by 2, and when you hit 5 days before the concert, the quality starts going up by 3. However, after the concert, quality drops to 0 immediately. Not worth a thing after the concert. So we've got a bunch of different items, all with different business rules on how the quality and the sell-in date change over time. And the Gilded Rose application takes a list of these items and walks them through all these various scenarios and makes sure. And there's some unit tests set up, yay unit tests, are set up to make sure that everything works. Okay, so let's demo the Gilded Rose. Oops. So I've opened up the spec for the Gilded Roses. They're written with given, when, then, our spec given. So given initial sell date, initial quality, and given an item with those values set in. When you update the item, under these circumstances, then the quality should decrease by 1, the sell-in date should decrease by 1. That's essentially what you saw in the slides, just kind of captured in our spec language. So let's run these tests. Oh, we've got failures. In fact, we got 4 failures here. And, gosh, I don't know what this is. Let's look at the code. goodness. What is this mess? I did mention this is a refactoring kata. So it's your goal, in normal circumstances, it's your goal to rewrite this code into something more maintainable. In fact, this is a great thing because the kata says, okay, you have a new rule to add it to this set of if tests. Ah! Okay. But obviously the original is not working right now. So let's use our normal technique here. So we get a list of items, update quality on items. We walk through each item. So here seems to be a good place to drop in our pride test, right? So we'll just require pride and call binding on it right away. We'll do that, and we'll go over here, and let's see, wait, hang on. I want to go back to the Joe says that when he watches me do live coding, it's like my fingers suddenly forget how to type. And I'm experiencing that just a little bit. We see a failure right here on line 116. Oops, 116. Okay, so that's this test right there. So let's just run that spec. And I'm going to do that from the command line like this. Our spec, Gilded, oops, am I in the right directory? Our spec, Gilded rows.rb, underscore spec.rb, and let's just run the test on line 116. So we're going to run one test. That way I don't get lots of things going through this. Okay, great, we're in try. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at our item. It's a backstage pass. Yeah, we knew that. It's got a sell-in date of 10 and a quality of 10. Those, if you can read that there. Okay. That all looks good. Now what do I do? What we're faced with here is a problem not in data, but in the logic of our code. And for this, pry is pretty much unhelpful. We want to step through the logic of this code and see what it's doing, rather than to examine the state of the data afterwards and see what went wrong. So this is a pure case where pry, although very handy for exploring data, doesn't help us at all. So let's use a different technique. Get out of pry. Let's go back to here. And let's, instead of saying pry, let's say debugger. This is how you invoke the debugger in Ruby. It's simply like that. And then when I run it, here's our spec. I say dash debug. On the command line, that will cause our spec to load the debugger for me. Then when I run it, bam, now I'm in the debugger. Let's do a little something here. Let's say set auto list. Is it true? Is that how you do it? Expecting a 1 or on. Set auto list on. That's better. Okay. I can ask the debugger where I am, and I can tell I'm right here on this if statement. If the item is not HBRE and the item is not a backstage pass. Okay, good. Let's walk through the code. The command you want to use in the debugger is n. So we'll do n. Since I turned auto list on, it's going to constantly tell me where I'm at. I can see now I skip down to if the item quality is less than 50. Well, we know it's 10. We can look at the item. The E command evaluates Ruby expressions in the debugger. So I can ask for the item, and it tells me, okay, there it is. It's for this particular concert. The sell-in date and the quality is 10. So we should pass this test and go to line 12. Okay, so I hit N again. I'm now on line 12, good. The next one should take us to line 13. Line 13 is the test to see if it's a backstage pass. It is a backstage pass, so I should go to line 11. Let's hit, and notice I'm just hitting return now. It remembers the last command I entered, so it will just repeat that if I just hit a return. That's really handy for walking through things. And, oh, I did not go to line 14. I jumped down to line 27. Let's list line 14 again, or line 13. Item is backstage passes to a TAFK. Do you know what that stands for? That's the artist formerly known as Level 80 Elite Tauren Chief. Another Warcraft reference. Evidently they do Warcraft songs, a rock band that does that. Okay, cool. So, all right. So, oh look, let's look at our item. Is it name? Oh, looky here. The item name is level 80 with a 0. This is level 80 with a capital O. I mistyped the code and I've got a typo in my code. Now here the problem is in the code, it's not in the data. I could have looked at the data all day long with pride and never seen this issue. So the debugger is perfect for finding logic errors in your code base. Okay. That's it. Let's jump back to the running. I just got a few minutes left. So let's just run through some debugger stuff really fast. Like I say, you're not going to master it, but if you know a handful of commands, you can get a lot done in the debugger. Eval will evaluate Ruby expressions. So if someone asks, can you jump into pry? Chances are this is good enough you don't really need pry. It does some, at least allows you to look around inside of Ruby. The next command we saw steps you through the logic. The S command also steps you through the logic, but steps into methods, as they're called. So if you want to delve down into a method, rather than just walking over it as it executes, the S command is for that. There's various list commands, and the set auto list command is obviously one that you want to be using in this mode. You can set breakpoints like this. You can delete breakpoints. Breakpoints allow you to run until you hit that spot in the code, and then it stops and drops you into the debugger. You can display expressions. So say, give me this Ruby expression right here, and every time I step, tell me what its value is. So you can watch the data change as you're stepping through the code. That's real handy for that. If you can't figure out where something is changing. And of course, there's exit, and there's a help command where all this information came from. So if you're ever lost, just type help, and you can ask for help for individual commands. It's pretty straightforward. It's easy to use. If you're in 1.9, you need to install the Ruby Debugger 1.9 version of it. It's a gem. If you're in Ruby 1.8, just the Ruby Debug normal gem. So both work, and both work fairly well. And I've probably got 1 minute left for questions. We didn't get a chance to see if pry worked or not, but I'll check that afterwards. Yeah?
Yeah, so just real quick, I just found that there's a gem called pry debug, which seems to be what I was asking about.
Okay, cool.
You actually have 10 minutes.
Oh, because we started early. Okay, awesome, awesome. The guy here with the iPad keeps flashing me 1 minute left, so I was going, yeah, he's at 49 seconds. We're going to stretch that out if you have more questions. So we're running ahead of time.
2 minutes.
He gave me 2 minutes and 40 seconds now. Okay. All right. Yes, in the back.
You can do IRB, go into from the debugger.
Yes, there is an IRB command in the debugger that you can just drop into regular IRB and do all your regular IRB stuff. So the problem with the debugger is that every time you want to evaluate something, you have to type E something, which is a little annoying. But you can drop into IRB, and then you got all the regular IRB things. You can get out of IRB and go back to the debugger. And I think there's even an auto-evaluate mode, which I think does, if it can't recognize it as a command, it goes and figures, oh, this is a Ruby expression, let's evaluate it anyways.
Yeah, there is at least one where it will automatically puts it, like P whatever the object that puts out the, and you can say, there's that debugger like RC or whatever, you can say to always put that mode on.
Oh, okay. Okay. The comment is there's a mode you can put it where it always prints out the object, like IRB, and you can also in your debugger RC file you can set it up so it automatically goes in that mode for you when you get into the debugger, so you don't have to set it up automatically. I imagine putting the set auto list in there would be a useful thing too. There are certain editors. I know Emacs, if you set it up just exactly right, Emacs will split your source code into the top window and the debugger interaction pane in the bottom window, and you can actually watch your code execute within an Emacs editor buffer. So that's, and other editors do that as well. I imagine some of the nicer IDEs allow nice integration with the Ruby debugger. You can run the debugger within a Rails program. That is quite easily doable. I have done that, and that's really handy to do as well. Yes?
Have you ever had the debugger actually open in a different context or scope from where it's inline?
The question is, have I ever had the debugger open in a different context or scope than where the debugger line is? I've never had that situation. I'm assuming you have. Do you know what causes that?
Or at the end of a method? Yeah.
Oh, it's the end of the method. Sometimes you pop the stack before it gets called. Interesting. Okay.
Just do like semicolon 4 or something like that, which just basically adds a like go to the end. So.
You can actually, this is cool, you can actually get a backtrace of everything you've been in the code, everywhere you've been in the code, all the call stacks down, and you actually walk up and down that call stack and print out variables at different levels of the call stack as well. So you say, I'm in this thing, I'm being passed this value, how did this value get to be this? You could walk up the stack to the point that value was defined and print out the environment of that method up there. So that is a really useful thing to do. The debugger is a super X-ray machine into your black box. It lets you explore all kinds of things. Now, you don't need it a lot. As I say, I don't run the debugger all the time. My first tool is puts, my second tool is pry, but if I get into a place where I need it, debugger's a good tool to, run at least once, get your handle on a few of these commands, and I think you'll be doing good. Okay, how much time do I have?
You've still got some more time.
Okay, still got more time, so more questions. Yes?
So in Java, you can connect to a running JVM through TCP with the debugger.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that with Ruby?
You can do that in Ruby. I have not done it, so I can't give you some practical advice on that, but there are commands, if you look at the debugger,
That's cool.
help things, there are telling you how to do that.
Thanks.
Okay. You might have to invoke the Ruby process in a special mode to make that available, but yeah.
How to do what?
Invoke the debugger on a running process, which is particularly useful if you're debugging some kind of long-running server thing that you can't run. I generally like to use the debugger in my unit tests because I can get in, I can run the thing over and over, and I know exactly what is set up in the unit tests. So I find that helpful there to debug from that point. Yes?
I've kind of trailed off from using it because of Spork, using Spork for my tests.
Okay.
And also running POW as the server on my Mac.
Okay.
And do you have any experience getting around either of those?
I don't run Spork. I try to get my unit tests to run fast enough without that. And I'm going to definitely look into some of the things Uncle Bob said last night, and particularly Corey Haynes, who does this all the time. Evidently, Corey Haynes has some techniques for getting your Rails tests to run really fast by not loading Rails all the time when you need them. So if you need fast tests, I tend to go that route rather than running a lot of infrastructure stuff to just throw more power at it. Yeah?
If you're running sports, you should be debugging.
If you're running Spork, you should not be debugging, is the comment. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And I imagine even if you're using Spork, it should be easy enough. Because when you're debugging, you want to run one unit test. You don't run the whole suite. So there's no need to run Spork for those. Yeah. All right. Going once, going twice. I have stickers. Talk to me later if you need anything. Thank you very much.